All right, we'll bring the order to plan. Yes, sir. We have a good start. We'll bring the meeting to order. Here it's Wednesday, June 20th, 2018. Our first matter is a request for an extension. This is the Millwood Realty LLC VESH information update, 86 Millwood Road. This parcel has been under a 5-year plan since, my goodness, probably the 90s, right? Early 90s. And anyway, it's that time again where we have the 5-year review to see what's going on in terms of activity on the site, nature of the tenancy, intensity of the uses, etc. And here we are. So, Sabrina, you have a memo on this?
I do have a memo, and I can kind of give the board some history and kind of where we are, if you would like. This requirement to visit with you every 5 years to do a quote-unquote check-in started in 2000 with your approval of the 2000 site plan. There was concern at that point that the businesses and the tenancy would stay the same in regards to intensity of use, making sure the site was kept in good condition. And there was discussion at that time that surrounding sewering of Millwood and this applicant's ability to meet with the Millwood design standards, which based on his current uses and his current zoning were difficult to meet the Millwood design standards. So the planning board in 2000 had put the requirement that he return every 5 years before you to extend his site plan approval. He returned in 2003. There was an extension request in 2005, and then in 2006 there was an amended site plan approval due to the location of Millwood Lumber on the site, which was a different tenancy than had previously been there and was determined to be more intense than the previous tenancy. In 2006, the site plan had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 approved tenants on the site, and there were specific requirements regarding storage containers. The site plan identified storage for different plant materials. So if you look at the site plan, there was a lot of detail put into it as to where things should occur on the site.
I think even parking was a
Yep,
big thing.
parking was counted as well. Correct.
Yep.
So today, the site plan, what I had done is I had met back, I guess, in 2013 with the applicant and gone through his site plan, and at that time information was not submitted to the board. So information has been submitted to the board in 2018 for this application, and what I had asked Mr. Vesh to do was to identify changes on his site from the 2006 site plan approval, which he did, which is the site plan you had before you that was marked up in red. Right now there are there are 5 tenants on the site. In addition, there's a storage tent in the location of a crate storage area that was identified in 2006. There is an addition of an 8x8 container to store inventory for one of the tenants on the site. There's area along the southern property line containing basketball backboard displays. Area located along the westerly property line where the original site plan identified as parking for 10 cargo equipment trailers. Today there are 5 cargo equipment trailers in the spaces along with a wooden shelving unit, and the measurements are provided on the site plan, which encloses the area for the additional 5 cargo trailers. One of the things that the board may or may not be aware of when it comes to commercial uses in the town building department has what's called a new business review form. All of our commercial businesses are required to fill out the new business review form, particularly when they're doing interior changes to buildings or changing the use on the site. The new business review form stimulates more information to be submitted, so we can examine the use, and the rule of thumb is if the use is seen as more intense than what was previously put there. If it is viewed to be more intense, and that could be from a parking perspective, it could be from an occupancy perspective, it can be from an actual use of the building perspective, then the applicant is told to come before you for a change of use site plan.
Does that apply also when there's just a change in the tenancy?
It does not. When there's a change in the tenancy, we are usually notified because there are some interior changes that need to be made, and we typically advise them to fill out the new business review form. So it's a normal standard today, which may or may not have been in existence to the extent that it is today back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So the building inspector is the approval authority in making a determination regarding the intensity of use. If it is more intense, then the approval authority bumps up to your board regarding site plan amendment. So this is the only commercial use in town that is required to come back to you every 5 years. And I think that's important for you to understand. In speaking with the building inspector over the years, he has reviewed different tenancies on this site. There are new business review forms in the files, and there's determinations by the building inspector that say it's more of an intense use versus not. The clearest example of that was when Millwood Lumber came onto the site, and he came back before you because Millwood Lumber was being located in specific locations on the site and making changes to the circulation on the site that the building inspector at that time determined needed to come before your board. Since then, the change of tenancy has really been in kind, with the exception of the outdoor storage for the Hoops Plus outfit that is locating on the site. So I just thought that was important history for the board to understand.
It says here that the lease expired.
Yeah, and I believe that the owner of the property can talk to the current tenancy on the site. There have been expiration of leases for current tenants, the uncertainty as to the future of tenancies staying there, and changes in tenancies.
So, and also I think it's important to understand that this really, although we're calling this an application, it really is not an application. It's really someone coming in just based on our requirement, a check-in. So nothing is really being proposed here in terms of activity, as I understand it. So
Correct.
It's just, okay. Okay. Did we have any questions for the applicant in terms of use of the property?
I have a question that has
Can you
to
speak
do-
into the microphone, please?
I have a question that has to do more with aesthetics than the actual use. So,
Ernie,
as
can you
I-
come up?
as I know you don't have any visuals today, so I'm going to try and, describe it visually. As you come along Millwood Road, there is a building that's got blackened windows that used to be a fence company, and now, as I understand it, Millwood Lumber is using it for storage. But I didn't know that it was used for storage. I thought it was just empty all these years. And I wonder if since that, as you come down Millwood Road, that's sort of your gateway into the Millwood Business District, if something could be done, even just signage, nice signage on the window that it's Millwood Lumber now, or that it's tenanted and not empty. If something can be done to make that look a little bit nicer as a gateway into the Millwood Business District. Planters, a little greenery.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's a lot of activity, and then there's no activity when it comes to the Millwood property. There's a lot of activity in the sense that people would like to develop the property, but it comes down to the availability of sewers. And then if it comes down to the availability of sewers, then it comes down to, well, Mr. Vesh, if we buy your property, what does the town have to say about the uses across the street, and what's the overall? And I never get involved in detailed conversations when it comes to those questions. What I do is I actually tell them to contact the town, and I also tell them to go online and look up the Case University study that was done, so that there are clear representations where the future of Millwood is going and how it gets there. In regards to, so that's the bigger picture and the bigger goal. When it comes to the individual building, and it comes to Millwood Lumber, there are vendors that Millwood Lumber has that would like to make that building a beautiful showroom. And one of them happens to be Anderson, and they would like to make that they have gorgeous plans that they would like to do, but nothing materializes. And that's a product of the economy. And where's the economy going? Because the economy is still not great. And it's maybe getting better, but from the shoes that I stand in, Millwood could be empty tomorrow with the tendencies that are there. When it comes to one of the tenants that you mentioned earlier, doing everything possible to stay in business. And it's not easy. But yes, your point is taken. Yeah.
Is there anything that can be done? I mean, I'm not asking for a big influx of money, just something that doesn't make it look like it's a vacant building, which is how it looks.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing, the town has no authority to make any of these requirements. The only time we really have authority is if he's making changes to the property that rise to the level of site plan approval with a new building or something like that. It's really the onus is put on the property owner to keep the property in good form.
I will do something.
It looks like a vacant building, and I thought it was vacant all these months that I go by.
Give me until September to see what may or may not be happening.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons, as I recall, that this property was subject to this 5-year review is it's one of the centerpieces as you come into Millwood. So it was always considered to be important in that manner, so it didn't, I know past boards were concerned that it would look much worse, and we spent an awful lot of time along the bike path and all the vegetative buffers and those sorts of things, and the applicant was always great in working with us and making those things happen. But I think that was one of the concerns why it's one of those,
Why
it's the only
it
one,
keeps coming
the only
back.
one for the 5-year. But the other issue is, we do have this mechanism now in town, and as much as Mr. Vesher loves to come to see us every 5 years, it's like a pilgrimage, right?
That's why he delays. and
exactly.
Extends it a little bit.
I wonder what the real usefulness of it is at this point, because we do have this mechanism where the town and the building department, any kind of activity is triggered, and it would come before the appropriate board or the building department. So as much as we'd love to have you here, but it's, I wonder. Sabrina and I talked about that before, and since, this is the only property, I wonder if we're really overreaching a bit and being a bit unfair at this point, because we don't have the same sorts of issues we had back in the 90s and 2000.
So Sabrina, just clarify again, what's the difference between a new building review form?
It's a new business
I'm
review
sorry, new
form.
Business review form and change of tenancy, which doesn't necessarily trigger a
Well,
review.
right, a change of tenancy is somebody who moves in and doesn't need to do an automotive shop that is completely within a building and has no external impact, changing tenancy with an automotive shop which is in a new building. Mr. Vesci submits a new business review form for every tenant that he tenants on his site. So it doesn't matter if it's just an as of right tenancy
Triggered
or
either
not.
way.
It's
Well, it's a
yes,
review anyway.
yeah, it's a review. When we have a business downtown, when we know that they're switching hands, they'll submit a new business review form to ensure that they are in keeping with the code requirements. So it is when that new business review form is submitted, or they come in to speak to the building inspector has them fill out the new business review form, which details what the new business is, and then the building inspector can make the determination regarding intensity of use. It happens a lot. As a downtown, we have a parking district. When we have new businesses, for example, Little Thai Kitchen came in, it was a change in intensity. It was the same type of use, a restaurant versus a catering, a takeout. The difference was the intensity of the restaurant use, going from a takeout to a sit-down restaurant, and their parking requirements. So that came before you, and if you recall, it came before you. We moved rather quickly due to the fact that it was in one of our business hamlets and it was a business. But they had several changes to make to the building for fire and safety codes. So a lot of the new businesses, the new tenancies are coming to the building department because of town codes, state codes that they need to adhere to, which is where we really get to determine, does that use trigger a more intense use and therefore need planning board approval?
No, it seems like the new business review form would trigger when the planning board's involvement or the ZBA's involvement would
Correct.
be required.
Correct. It's triggers for both boards, to be quite honest with you, and even the ARB or the architectural review board.
I personally feel, confident that we'd capture those kinds of changes and that either at the building department or later on, if it's that significant, we would see it.
I'm a little concerned that, what Mr. Vesky said, that he's concerned that just like this, poof, that whole tenancy thing, everything would just disappear, there would be no revenue, and I'd be then interested in, well, how is the place going to be taken care of then? And if that's not
I don't know if
subject to review.
Vacancy trigger an application? or
Well,
trigger,
it does not
appearance?
trigger a new business review form, but properties that are left in a deteriorating state, and, for example, if the grass isn't mowed, or if there's garbage on the front yard, my office as code enforcement handles complaints like that. We have several properties around town that have either been vacated or left fallow that we get calls on, and, they may end up in the courts, and the court mandates property management.
We did have an issue like this in Millwood before with that little former train station,
Mm-hmm.
which was not maintained and then eventually became unsafe and had to be pulled down, which I don't really think anybody had wanted to see happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it rots.
Yeah.
Right. So it has to trigger a code that would require enforcement, to be quite honest with you. And, given the level of staffing and the attention, we don't go out and look for problems. It's only when they become a health and safety hazard that we act on
Excuse me,
them.
we need to keep the door open because it's a public meeting. Sorry.
Thank
I
you.
don't think we can close
No, we
both
can't
doors.
No,
close
we
both.
cannot close it.
No,
No,
it's
no,
okay.
it's
As
okay.
long as one is open.
Everybody gets 50%.
We always like an exit plan. Well, Jennifer, what would we do if we, on this particular matter, it's an application, I guess, but this matter to, extinguish the requirement?
Yeah, so there's two things that would be
If-
on
if
the
we're
table
so-
tonight, right? So one would be to retroactively approve an extension from 2013, when it originally expired, to the present. If you wanted to keep that 5-year check-in requirement, you should then extend it another 5 years into 2023. If you wanted to do away with that 5-year check-in requirement, you could do that by a motion to eliminate that as a condition of your 2000 site plan approval. And you wouldn't then need to extend the site plan
beyond this
beyond.
So
the
we
present.
still we should do the retroactive 2013, just for the record.
Right.
Okay.
At least up until the present, and then whether you need to go out another 5 years
Right.
would depend upon whether you want to extinguish
We
that
have to
5-year
do
check-in requirement.
Retroactive?
Of course.
2013. Baby steps here. Is there a motion to grant the retroactive extension?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
How do we feel about the going forward? You okay? Are you comfortable, Dick, with extinguishing it?
I'm a little unsure.
Mhm.
I could see the way he outlined everything, it makes me nervous about that, and
Mhm.
I don't really want it to lay fallow. I like the idea that someone's going to do something. I could easily see, though, changing it to 10 years.
Should be safe, so you don't have to see us.
That would be the idea.
Is there,
Talk
is
about
there,
kicking the can.
is there any way, and just thinking out of the box, to extinguish the requirement, but put a town requirement to check in with him every 5 years?
That would work too for me.
Do you know what I'm saying? Can you authorize, like, for example, authorize the director of planning to visit the site every 5 years to ensure everything is in keeping order? You know, so that he doesn't have to come back before the board that.
Do throw the drawings and sketches. and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, because that's you know, time and money on his part
Yes.
to prepare everything for you, and that way, you know, I am, or the building department is required to pay a visit every 5 years, and so if it does go fallow in 5 years, if it's in disrepair, then the code enforcement officer can say,
I like
Yeah.
that very much, because then, you know, if someone is a sloppy tenant and there's electrical issues, doesn't take care of them,
right, that would be the building inspector.
yeah, that's even
Exactly,
better.
fire and safety, and it gives them,
Yeah, I like that.
it would give him permission to knock on the door and go on the property and inspect the surroundings
At the discretion of the building inspector.
at the discretion of the building
If he finds a
inspector.
problem, then he comes back to the planning board.
Sure.
And that would be,
Makes sense.
and the visit
Easier.
would be every 5 years. It doesn't have to be, or, you know, triggered by a complaint.
Correct,
And-
correct,
5 years and/or a complaint.
Yeah, which is kind of
Yeah.
close
We
to
have
what
it.
everybody else gets anyway.
correct.
That's right.
Can we bump it to 10 years though?
That was if you do the lot of paperwork. If you want the limited paperwork and just a visit with the,
We really want one more swing. I think that makes good sense. I think that's a good.
Is
yeah,
that
good
possible?
suggestion.
It's possible, yeah. Is that amenable to the applicant?
Okay. So.
So you're not gonna, so you'd have to do,
extinguish.
So it would be a
Amendment
modification
of the.
of the
requirement.
condition, right? To be, instead of a 5-year check-in with the planning board, a 5-year check-in with
By the building
by town
inspector.
staff,
Well,
building
yeah, it would-
inspector.
And it would be, instead of delivering documents, it would be this visit, which would be triggered by the 5-year period or, you know, complaints.
But the site plan remains valid, so there's no
Yes.
further extensions of the site plan that would be required.
Right.
Okay.
So do we have to make that,
A motion
that-
to amend the condition.
of the 2000
Yeah,
site plan approval?
Yep.
Okay.
as we just described.
As we just described.
So
there a
this is sort of
motion?
a joint review by building department and director of planning.
Well,
Sabrina,
I
what
would
are your
think that
thoughts
only
on
one
that?
person would go.
Only one person would go, but both would get involved.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have to be a submittal.
No, it could
Right.
be a site visit,
Site
and then
visit.
if
Unless
anything is triggered by that
requested.
site
Yeah.
visit,
That's right.
there would
Unless
be
requested.
follow-up
So
to it.
Changes the onus from
It's really good.
you having to deliver something to being receptive and then responding, so.
Yeah. Good. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So is there a motion accordingly?
You know,
Based-
can we do this? Can we do a joint inspection by the building inspector and town engineer to be facilitated by the town planner? By the director of planner? Because I'm the one who's gonna make sure that they go out in 5 years, and Bob is gonna look at the site, the building inspector is gonna look at the buildings.
Okay.
Excellent.
As many as you want to send out.
Like she
Just wanna
said,
make sure the authority is placed where the authority
Yeah,
needs to
I
be.
think that makes good sense.
Yeah.
Okay?
And, you know, until we get into more secure times where things maybe can be changed again in the future. But right now, you have old buildings, and old buildings, unless I'm wrong, tend to have more problems than brand-new buildings.
Right.
So,
What are sewers?
sometime within
It's
the
over our
next
pay scale.
millennium. I'm positive of it.
Your boss.
Write me a letter if it doesn't happen.
You got his guarantee on it.
I'll contact you.
If we meet there, that'd be, you know, we can talk about it.
Very good. All right.
Okay.
Do we have such a motion then, as Jennifer proposed, as Sabrina and Bob suggested with their change?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
for stopping by.
Take care. Okay, we move now to our next item. This is a public hearing on the APL application, the Hammond Ridge Conservation Subdivision Lot Number 3. The application for a site development plan amendment and stormwater pollution prevention plan approval for a swimming pool, 18 Hammond Ridge Road. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
There was a run over copperhead in front of your property last week when we were out there. Remember
Yeah,
that?
he
You
was
saw
there.
it? Yeah,
Oh, you didn't come with us to the front, yeah.
on the road.
Oh, you went out?
When we
To the
went out.
road.
Road?
You saw it?
Yeah,
What was it?
the Copperhead.
Copperhead that was run over.
So Steve should tell us whether that's happening around here. Because if it is, we need to
I'm sure it is happening.
have an alert.
Okay, here we are.
Good evening.
Thank you for, having us over for the site visit.
Thank you for
very
coming.
helpful.
I think, I hope it was beneficial.
Yes, it was.
I mean, seeing the site, I do think really does help
Yep.
when we make these decisions. So we're back, obviously, based on the plan that was submitted last time. We had gone through the reasons why the pool was where it was in the sort of back of the.
Setting that on?
I got it, yeah, I do it.
Well, let's have, Sabrina, I have a question.
Sure.
This is 2-acre zoning and it's downgraded to 1-acre zoning rules, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that, given that this is a larger lot, is that extra square footage already calculated relative to the overages, or was it just to, because usually, don't you have a?
You set in the resolution of approval what the threshold should be.
Based on?
Based
probably
on-
the 1 acre that was. the
Based
conservation.
on, I don't know, I wasn't there back then, wasn't sure where your discussions
you
came
know.
from.
So-
But, which is why, why information relative to zoning has been provided.
Right.
Because he is not over the zoning coverages, he's over the limitations set by the planning
Right.
board. And he's over the exceedance of 15%, which you allow.
Mhm.
So, but for example, in Random Farms, when you did that conservation subdivision, there are oversized lots in that conservation subdivision, and you dictated in your resolution of approval back when the subdivision came in, what each of those lots' coverages should be.
Ah, so here we did a blanket.
No, you did the same thing here.
Oh.
Each lot had its own coverage. They weren't all the same.
They weren't all the same.
No.
And how does the acreage fit the chart?
What do you mean, how does the?
Well, for the, well, we have development coverage that's maximum permitted,
Right,
and then.
Within the zoning.
It is within the zoning. So the threshold for zone, I think, was something like 15,000 square feet.
For development coverage.
Right, 15909. That is the as of right based on zoning. But in conservation subdivisions, you folks dictated, the planning board dictated
Okay.
the coverage. So I don't know if you factored in the size of the lot when you did the individual assignments for the lots. I can't answer
It's
that.
usually based on what they have the applicant submits. Because the applicant always submits a coverage count for each lot.
Correct,
During
based on their
planning,
build out of
and
that
They only go
lot.
based on what the applicant submits, based on the
And
10%.
back then, this is one of the first
and
ones that we
50%.
did this on. We actually asked the applicant to show us what they realistically thought they were going to develop in terms of size of home,
That's right.
pool, et cetera. So really, what they did was we asked them to give us realistic numbers, and then we still gave them the 15% cushion because we, things change, et
Okay.
cetera.
Based on what they submitted.
Yeah, I think we first started that with Christian Herald. That was the first one we
That's
did that.
why we did it, because of Christian Herald.
Yes.
Because there were never any regulations such as that. It was
Right.
after Christian Herald.
So what we used to see was cookie cutter drawings for what might be like a little 1,500 square foot high ranch. And then we found out in other places that they would come back and these things were, 8,000, 9,000 square feet and the coverage was enormous.
Well, case in point, that's happened on Christian Herald.
Yes, that was
And
the
there was a
one.
big
That's what
uproar. They
triggered it.
went to the town board and
Yep. That's what happened.
required this.
Yep.
Downsizing.
So to a certain extent, we, it's not this property owner, of course, but it was the original developer who thought that this would be a realistic number and something that would be livable.
Mm-hmm, okay.
See, the public is warming up for us.
course, you have the same, of course, you have the same problem, Robert. With that, with the clearing and grading, they sometimes don't put in the most realistic. They put in
yes.
something smaller.
That's
Right.
true.
And then the future owners
Are stuck.
suffer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's happened to us on other projects.
Sure.
Happens time and time
Oh,
again.
this takes 10 seconds. I'll do it this
Yeah,
way.
That's
This'll
right.
be fast. Yeah, thanks a lot. Then you're done.
That's right, just to get the approval quicker.
I have paper copies if this for some reason.
not working. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, we have copies,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah. Someone makes extra copies and gives them to us. Imagine
Yeah.
that.
I wonder who does that.
Got some guys standing in a little room.
Ah,
So, as I said, hopefully the site visit
I am.
puts in perspective kind of where this pool
This
is.
like started in,
Obviously, we understand the numbers, that's why we're here.
started in
The fact
April.
that it's where it is removed from the neighbors.
Yep.
Has
Yeah.
no impact on the environment. We're within zoning
Yep.
setbacks. We're obviously within the limits of grading and
I don't know where I found it.
disturbance areas. So, yeah, we're hoping to move forward if possible.
I think we
I like
were
this one.
satisfied, right, with the location?
Yeah, well, I think the location is fine by,
I think, you know, given the size of the property and the way the terrain works, I think it fits in very nicely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good to be there and to see it, so I
Yep.
mean, it just,
Thanks for doing that.
Yep. so that makes it very simple, I think, so we don't have any issues there. So we're really, and I think Dick has alluded to this a number of times, before we take questions from the public, of course, is what we really need to be, I think, here is very careful in distinguishing this property if we're so disposed to extend or grant the extension for the additional coverage. And, you know, again, we've alluded to those. It's an oversized lot. It's 2.92 acres. There are no environmental impacts, et cetera. To make this very special and very distinguished and in terms of why, in this particular case, if we are so inclined, that we are going to grant this, what is it, overage of about, what, 1,500 square feet? 1,100 square feet?
well, if they take out the.
If they take the semicircle out, it's less, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
929, I think,
Yeah.
or, I don't know what it is,
Yep.
so he'll have to tell
I
us.
think it's about 1,000 square feet,
Yeah,
but roughly.
9588.
Well, that's about 2,000 over.
Hmm?
Is that about 2,000 square feet over the 15%?
No.
Hang
Oh,
on.
you,
7388 is what they were permitted, and they're going to 8188?
I think 9,500.
9588.
So
Oh, you're right.
here's,
Okay, that's right, yeah.
so the development coverage allowed 6,425 square feet with a 15% allowance, which brought it to 7,388.75. Right now, without the project, the site contains 8,835 square feet of coverage, which is 1,446.25 greater than allowed by your resolution. Okay? They offered to reduce the existing coverage by removal of a staircase in the gravel parking area by 647 square feet. So that's, you subtract the 647 from the 8,835 and you get 8,188 square feet, which is still higher than that which was approved, but not as bad.
800 to 900, somewhere in that range.
Correct. And so now they're asking to add 753 square feet for the pool and the equipment pad, which would bring the site coverage to 9,588 square feet, which includes the reduction of the 647.
Okay.
So it's 2,200 square feet over.
Yeah.
But given the size, all the things that we've talked about already,
Yes.
I think it's reasonable for this
I
property.
do too.
And I don't, and you know, one of the conditions that we were looking at to see was to see whether the bucolicness of the conservation subdivision would be maintained with the placement of the pool, and I think it is. So
Yeah, I think that's something that we should add to distinguish it, that we're, the quality
the quality of the subdivision and the
is-
purpose of the
not
subdivision is not
compromised at all.
impeded by this.
Yep, yep. I agree.
Well,
I think we can make all those kinds of levels of distinction Also, I mean, I guess one other thing which is perhaps important is we are introducing a pool, and I mean, it could be a water supply in terms of fire, because we just have wells out here,
That's true.
so no hydrants. So it's actually sort of a benefit if you look at it from that standpoint,
Well, let's
public
make note
safety.
of that one too, so
Yeah.
yes. But that'll make, everybody's gonna want to have their fire safety improved. Next
It
week.
would anyway.
All of the distinct, you have to meet all the things that we're going to set forth in this resolution.
I see,
So,
I see. Well,
don't have a choice of 1 out of 10, but all 10.
I'm still struggling with this because it's, given the way it's set up and everything, yeah, it is roughly a 3-acre site in a 2-acre zoning area, which has been knocked down to 1 acre because of the nature of what was trying to be done when the development was made. And so I'm still struggling with that. So Bob, I have a question. Where does the world stand on permeable pavement? Yeah, I'm reading new stuff, where they're
The world or Bob's world?
I guess that would be the tougher one, to use Bob's world.
From my opinion
That'll
of this,
definitely be the tougher
the
one.
only
Exactly.
Yeah, but
permeable paver, 2 things. A lot of people think you get 50% or there's no increase in impervious, but actually there is, and you only get a reduction in the curve number. So as far as stormwater is concerned, you get a slight reduction on the runoff. But then again, with the permeable pavers, you always have to make certain the underlying soils are good as far as perk rate and groundwater. Because if you don't have if you have the groundwater and not good perk rates, it makes no sense to put it in.
Right.
You said what you'll have is permeable pavers with an underdrain system, so you might as well have pavement. So, I mean, if you're gonna have permeable pavers, you really have to do soil testing.
okay, so what they're coming out now with soon is permeable concrete
Right. But even
with carbon
that-
fiber in it.
Right, even with that, that's a lot of maintenance.
Okay.
The one thing I will say, and I appreciate your concern, the pool itself basically is no runoff. Whatever falls on a pool stays on a pool. So the only other additional surface would be the bluestone terrace that's adjacent to the pool, and that's been cut down pretty significantly too. That if, I could talk to my client about it, but if that were to be set on sand and gravel or something like that with more porous joints, that may
You get a
help.
small reduction, just for instance, if you have asphalt, curve number's 98.
yeah.
If you have permeable pavement, you get maybe 87. It's not gonna make much of a difference on runoff.
And if you get gravel.
Also, too, by the way, New York State DEC, right in their definitions, includes pool area as impervious.
Okay,
I know
and,
they do, but the reality of that is crazy.
But I go by what DEC does.
I
so.
understand.
okay, and if you had gravel on top of sand with good soil underneath, would that have a different curve number?
Yes, not much difference, but you're looking between 85 and 87.
Okay.
It wouldn't drop off substantially. It's never gonna reach what the grass would be at 61. But it'll be a little bit less, 10%, 20%.
Would gravel over sand compact over time and thus
Of course, that's the
reduce its
problem-
permeability?
That's the problem you have with that.
Well, that
It's
would
in a
be-
driveway.
If it were a driveway, but if it's just a place where you walk through, you can always rehab it.
It's also a
easily.
place where they want to put their lawn chairs or
Yeah, and
chaises.
you can imagine your feet on the gravel and the sand in the pool, and it's a mess.
I don't know how good that would work.
Not very, yeah.
Well, we have seen some people where they've eliminated or really reduced those kinds of,
That's actually what we
Areas.
had done too. So
Well-
we've gotten rid of the majority of that, at least twice as much of
right.
that.
But what other people have done is actually just made it grass. And just a little bit of a cover, right, just for the gutter, and then
We
it's
see
all
more
been
and more
grass.
people, just for the coping,
Yeah,
coping's
coping.
about 6
That's it.
inches. We see more and more come in with the grass, and we talk
Yeah.
to the people after it's been in use for years. They say it's love it, it's
Yeah,
safer.
So we have seen that,
Mhm.
and
Sure.
to reduce the exposure.
I think part of the issue we've had with that is just in terms of furniture. If you're going to have some chaise lounges out there and a table, what happens with that is that turns to mud because it's basically shading that area. So the grass really is kind of, it's not very robust. So unless somebody is physically moving the chairs and the tables around, and we're not talking about a huge area,
Right.
but it's pretty modest. I have seen that happen. It's happened in my own yard. So we're looking to have, a modest amount of terrace for some chaise lounges and an outdoor table.
And those numbers also include the take-up of this walkway too, right?
Correct.
The 2,200 includes that?
We always go
Yes.
by the net,
Okay,
new net impervious.
yep, okay.
All right, another question. When we say development coverage, a lawn doesn't count, right?
Correct.
Nope,
No.
only man-made surfaces.
Even if it's man-made sod. But yes, right, nature
Right.
did it, I know.
Grass is the only thing not included, and mulch.
Is, given the way the grassed area is on this property, which is modest to say the least, because of the way it's set up, is there a way to compare the grassed areas that exist on this property with the grassed areas in other, I don't know, even homes in this subdivision? Because I'm looking for something that says that given the restrictions that have been imposed on the amount of grassed area, if other properties that are smaller have more, then I'd be willing to give, that as another feature, that they've limited the amount of grassed area they have, grassed and planted and developed, so that if another piece of property was 2 acres and it had 50% more grassed area, I would say, well, gee, okay, that's, if that's.
We have this
We have the pictures.
Yeah, this will, I hope.
picture here of three houses across the street. It's not a full sampling, of course, but it's a sampling. So
Yeah.
here's the
Here's
applicants.
a pool that's got some tile, some sort of tile work or cement work.
So their grass area, I guess this is grass too, it's just
Yes.
shaded.
That's the septic.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
that
shaded by the trees, so that's grass. So it's a lot of grass here, but it seems to
But
be
this-
equivalent to this with our septic probably is down there.
Well, I think this is actually more,
Mm-hmm.
because you take this piece back here, and that fits there, and then this is twice as much, and you have all this, so it's 20%.
I guess in this one too.
Yeah, that's huge.
I looked
It's
at that
cut
on a
off,
bigger
yeah.
scale.
Yep. And this one over here is,
A little different because it's,
got so much rock too.
the whole front of that is ledge.
Yeah, so I guess that doesn't go very far. It's inconsistent.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, it's very site specific.
Well, I don't know what else to say or ask. I would think also as a minimum that we would want restrictions on any increase in the grassed area over what this plan has. And any further development has to be offset 1 for 1. And it has to be somehow attached to the plat, or the, so we can get it on the drawing so that the next owner doesn't come in oblivious.
Mhm.
And so we have to come up with a list of things like that, I think.
Okay.
I think we should also have a rule of thumb that, given that this, that this property is, what do you want to say, 46% bigger than the average 2-acre zoned lot, although there are some that are bigger, that, that we would say that some increases in development could occur because the property is bigger.
Well, what we could actually do is tie it perhaps arithmetically to the actual, that's a good point, to the actual size of this lot
I agree.
as a percentage.
Yep.
And then we can use that as kind of a consistent rule for someone else who might come forward and say, well, wait a second. The reason we did it here was only 15% of the entire lot, in which you're asking for.
What is the percentage of the development on this lot?
I forgot to bring the slide.
But you
with
would be talking about this in conservation
Not
subdivisions
develop-
only?
me. I think in this, for Hammond Ridge itself.
Just for, so
Yeah.
this would be a rule just for the
Yeah,
Hammond Ridge
we haven't
subdivision?
I think we'd have to
percentages.
legislate
I
to
know
do
the
that
square
for
footages.
Well, that's what I
conservation.
was,
Yeah.
that's what I was
I
wondering.
would think in this
But
development.
given that it's under what we're zoned for 2 acre and 1
Or
acre.
just for us as just a
8%.
basic benchmark that we would
How
think
much,
about.
8%?
Roughly, 8.2%.
I think it would also be helpful going forward, and this doesn't have anything to do with your application, but, given what Bob said about possibly a developer shows just the quickest and easiest layout, we should anticipate perhaps that that people are gonna want, a lot of people are gonna want pools in their backyards. And when we see applications for new subdivisions, we should look for them putting in a pool. Look for them showing the terrace to see what the development coverage potential might be.
I think we
did do
should,
that.
and that's what we did, but what happened here was the prior owners actually built these other things which they got COs for, but they actually exceeded the coverage when they put the pergola and the patio in the back.
And yet, when we went to look at it, none of it looks
Oh,
out
no,
of place
no,
or
exactly, given the size.
overdone for the size of the house.
And even the
and size of
location,
the
which is at the
property.
rear of the home, et cetera. So that was really what, I think that's why the
And there would
applicants,
have been more flexibility if some of these tanks had been put someplace else, but
Right.
there they are buried. So, maybe tanks should be put someplace else so that the backyard remains available for
Yep.
the pool or whatever.
What's often the case too, you'll see it with, when somebody comes in with a subdivision plan, where the septic tends to be in the front where it can be, in anticipation of something happening in the back, like a pool or sport court or something like that.
So, what I might say, if the math works, is that given that we believe that this property is constrained by rock outcrops and is well vegetated naturally, has a reasonable or reasonably small or reasonably modest amount of developed and grassed areas, those grassed areas should be marked and not exceeded. The turnaround area, that should be thrown into the pot here, and that not from a building coverage point of view, I guess, are we okay on the building coverage? Did I read that right, or is that over too?
No, that's not over, that's
Okay.
fine.
So that the building coverage cannot, under no circumstances, exceed the requirements we had. We would allow another, I don't know, pick a number, whatever it gets it to this right place with the cutout of the numbers. I don't know if, I can't tell if it's in here or not. So did you subtract the turn?
Yeah,
back?
Yes, that's back
that's
out.
subtracted the 2,200.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, so we're shy 2,200 feet, which would be, let me see, I don't know what they do. Allowed development coverage is, do you know what that is?
That's about 15,000.
Well, that's using,
15, almost 16,000, 15,909.
well, that's the maximum allowed
Zoning.
for a 2-acre zone, right? Not for a 1 acre.
No,
It's 2 acre.
Yeah, that's 2 acre.
Right.
Yeah,
This is 2-acre
Yes.
zoning.
yes, this is 2 acre zoning.
Oh, so I'm confused. I thought,
This is 2
It's a
acre
conservation,
zoning.
but it's downgraded to 1 acre, one.
So as of the zoning coverage of 15,000 is what is allowed as coverage in a 2 acres, a lot in a 2 acre zone that doesn't have any other caveats to it, like a conservation lot.
okay, what would be the conservation lot number again? Tell me.
The conservation lot was what you approved at
7388.
7388.75.
With the
So in other
15%.
words, the code,
No, without the
15%, that's the 15%.
That's,
so the
7388.
code didn't dictate that, the planning board dictated
Correct.
that
Yeah,
when
that's
when
right.
the
Correct.
subdivision was created.
All right, so that if we need 2,200 more, which is, all right, so the equation I have would be something along the lines of that we would allow an increased development coverage for a lot with the constraints that we outlined, that would be an additional, say, 30%, or 2/3 of the amount of acreage that exceeds 2 acres. In other words,
I don't know if I would go with that myself.
no?
No, I think it's complicated, but I think the distinguishing features of this particular lot are, all this activity is not impacting any environmental slopes or wetlands. Once we get the stormwater pollution plan, and we can look at that, but it doesn't do that. I liked what I thought where you were going, which was only 8% of this entire lot has been impacted.
Mhm.
And as a percentage, we think that is one of the distinguishing features of this particular oversized lot. I'd like to use that 2.922 acres as something to use in the denominator to say that's one of the reasons why we went for this, along with the other ones that you've mentioned in terms of, it's no environmental, fire, and also,
Well, I agree with that, but
So what is the percentage, so what I think would help is, what is the average other lots in this subdivision, what are their sizes? And how much oversized is this lot compared to the other lots?
What's the acreage on this? 2 point,
2.9.
2.92, I think.
So, my problem with that, Bob, is if somebody has a 2.1 acre lot, it exceeds 2 acres. So therefore, they can ask for a, 8%.
Well,
That's too much.
Okay, so,
It could be,
That's
but,
why I'm trying to get with,
but that's only one of the elements, and then, it's just not the measurement. It's
Okay.
also the fact that we're not impacting steep slopes. It's the fact that it fits in very nicely with the bucolic nature.
well, that should be included.
Exactly, and I think all of those things are what we should use to distinguish this particular parcel and why we are inclined to, we're comfortable with this application, even though it exceeds it by 30%.
so,
By 2,200 square feet.
so if I may,
Sure.
in this subdivision alone, I think there are like 3 or 4 lots that are close to 3 acres or greater, and the remaining are less than 2 acres, you said?
Are there like 2 or, I would say there's like 5 or 6 that are 1.5.
1.5,
Most total-
right,
This is in
and
fact the
so.
largest, I think, is it not?
No, it's fourth largest.
Fourth largest, okay.
Okay, so just in preparing you for this discussion in another subdivision or wherever we may have it, I think that not to be hung up on the amount of coverage per se, but that the fact that the overage does not impact steep slopes, does not impact wetlands, does not, does not have any negative detrimental impacts to trees, wetlands, or steep slopes,
And it also stays within the clearing and grading limit line.
is within the clearing, the approved clearing and grading limit line. I think,
Marked.
right, I think those 4 characteristics are
Fairly safe.
differentiating enough to justify the overage, because you have not seen an application like this that does not confront that existing clearing and grading limit line. This is the first time that it's within a clearing and grading limit line. There are no trees, no steep slopes, and no wetlands. First time since I've been sitting before you reviewing these applications. And I think that those are the 4 thresholds, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, that you can use to distinguish this oversized lot. And if you look, if you're applying the 1 acre zone because it's conservation and this is almost 2 acres, you can create an acreage overage to apply to the overage, the over lot.
And those are
if
good
you wanted
touchstones
to.
because they really go to our code, which is always interesting to use the code every once in a while for our decisions.
I also, I agree. I also think one of the comments that the board members made earlier too about, preserving sort of the intent of the subdivision too, the bucolic nature
Yeah.
of the subdivision, that is still intact even by approving this
Consistent with the
application.
comprehensive
That's
plan.
an important feature as well.
and that's a 5th item
Mhm.
to mention in the resolution.
Sure.
All
Yes,
good points.
yes.
And no neighborhood impact.
6.
Okay, no neighborhood impact, no
And fire
requirement-
safety,
And
right?
just outline those so you can see why
No need
you
for,
allowed them.
no need for off-site screening,
Mhm.
another one.
Correct.
Although, well, when we get to it, I thought that we would see a little bit more screening around, again, where the pool mechanical equipment is.
It's
And
on the other
justify it.
plan.
Oh, it's not on this one?
You're right, it's the first one without an encroachment.
That's ancient history, that's a month already.
No, it's the same plan, but just when it's going up and it's moved.
Ah, okay. Terrific. Yep, fine.
Okay, that's on-site.
And there's
screening.
no tree removal permit required. We're undersized and we are moving
Another
those
one,
trees.
yeah. Which
No
again is
trees, no
fairly unusual,
wetlands,
too.
no
Oh,
no
this
slopes.
is the first, I would say.
Okay, I like it.
No,
It is, like Sabrina said,
yeah,
first time I
it is
remember.
it's the
No clearing
first
and
time
grading.
there's no clearing and grading limit line issue.
You see, always at least.
Could be the
that.
application of the year.
It could be. I've got six characteristics. Would you like to hear them?
We'd love to.
There's no tree removal impacts. There are no wetland impacts. There's no stormwater impacts.
There's a
Or no
stormwater.
steep slopes,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
stormwater.
There's no steep slope impacts.
And wetland.
It does not affect the bucolic nature of the subdivision. It does not impact the neighbors, and this is an oversized lot in a conservation subdivision.
And it doesn't alter the clearing and grading limit lines.
No alteration
In the approved clearing and grading
It's within the original
Yep.
approved
within,
clearing and grading limit.
he gets extra points for that one.
And you want to put the percentage in
With
there
the
too, because I divided it
original-
out Based on what they have total, because I got my calculator
Yeah.
here. It's about 7.5%.
Yeah, you were close. Yeah.
You were pretty good.
Within
You want to put
10%.
that in there.
So what is the wording you want to use for that?
Let's just say the
What is it?
percentage
It is an oversized lot, and the percentage
The total development coverage is
of
only
development,
7.5% of the total lot area.
and the percentage of
Gotta be on the low
development
side compared to what we normally see.
coverage.
All these conservation lots that we've been seeing recently have been much more than that.
Percentage of development coverage
Yes.
is
It's only 7.5%.
So if we put that in the resolution,
7.5%.
is that then saying
The total lot area.
that no other lot can exceed
No.
7.5%?
No.
It's only saying that this
No,
is a
it's just, it's
distinguishing
showing that
feature of
this is less than
particular-
10%.
I wouldn't be comfortable if
Yeah,
we
I
were
think
saying
it's just an
that.
observation for
Yeah,
the town.
10%.
Yeah,
That's a good
as long
cover.
as it's just an observation for the specialness of this lot.
Yes, and that's exactly, what she just said is, I totally agree with. You have all these factors, and as a result of these factors, a 7.5% overage, or whatever that number is defined as, would be allowed in this particular case only.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
that's.
It
solves the problem
it
with you.
mitigates
Yeah,
the
yeah.
And then
precedent
you have to take a look
impact.
anew at anything else
Yeah,
that comes up.
absolutely.
Well, it sets a benchmark for all other cases like
Well, it could be
this.
something that we look at. I don't, again, my understanding is that the planning board is not as rigorous as the zoning board in terms of stare decisis, that we
That's correct.
can be a little
but-
bit more flexible.
Right, and I think that's due to, in part, the nature of the applications
Right.
that come before you. But this certainly helps mitigate against someone in the future using just the
Yes.
pure
I
math
think
of
what
the
you-
overage
term, which is
to
very-
say, hey, you approve this, you need to approve
They say wouldn't
ours.
meet all those conditions.
It's unlikely. I mean, there may be someone that does, and maybe,
One does, right.
the application would be warranted in that instance.
Okay.
But
We want some of this to be on the plat, or the site plan or whatever that's filed.
So there's a site, here there's a site plan that's filed with the town. If you want something to be within the chain of title, to put future
Yeah.
owners on notice, then it would need to be a deed restriction.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I know you mentioned something about an offset of 1-to-1 for future development. That's where I thought I heard you talk
Yes.
about something about future owners. So that would be one thing. I don't know what else in here
Well,
that we've talked about
that
would
be for
really
building
be.
coverage and development coverage, and that would do it.
So that would have to be in the form of a deed restriction filed
Okay.
against title.
Okay.
Okay.
You understand that?
No, I don't understand the deed restriction part. You wanna, I don't know if that's something to explain it or not, but
We can, yeah.
everything is
Come up.
making the lot
Yeah,
unique,
those are good points.
but I don't wanna do something that ultimately is going to adversely affect the overall property, so I'm not sure I understand what the
Okay.
deed restriction is.
Well, Jennifer can probably explain it best.
Sure, deed restriction would be something that would put future owners on notice that what they can do on the property is limited.
What more they can do on the property in terms of
So if
development.
somebody comes and they want to build a bigger pool, they can do it if they offset it with something else, one for one.
Well, why can they build a bigger pool if they at all without coming to the planning board, who by default would have to approve that?
Many
Well, if it's
property
not-
owners many property owners don't understand that they need to come before the planning board.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of stuff that's built improperly, illegally, and then the new owner gets to suffer the consequences.
A lot of times they don't look at the plans at all, so if there's something in the deed, it's gonna be picked up, and it'll be a lot more prevalent to see.
Right,
So it's
so
a
when
matter
you're,
of notice. I don't think anyone's trying to impact marketability or
It doesn't.
value. It doesn't.
I
It's
know,
just,
it
it's
doesn't.
really just notice, so that you're on notice that what you're buying, this is it, and this is what you can do, and so at least they understand.
So once this plan is approved, with all of the, expansions that you have, and the deductions that you have, that'd be a set of numbers, that'll be, in the findings, in essence, that we put out. but we would then want notice that as of a such and such date when the project is finished, that any other development coverage or building coverage increases, would have to be one for one. So if you're going to build a bigger building, well, then you're going to have to come in or the person who buys your property has to come in and explain what they're going to reduce to build what they want.
So in other
That's
words,
above and beyond.
So just a random question for you, let's say the worst thing that happens is a fire, and they use the pool water to try to put out the fire, but ultimately are too late, and then they need to rebuild the property.
They can rebuild it as,
Deed restriction impact that?
nope.
No, it actually gives the impetus to build what was there without any problems.
well, yeah, so
Which is all within the normal confines of what is allowed to be.
For this particular site, what is allowed for this particular site, yes. So
Right,
if
the board
pergola
is giving
burns-
you permissions beyond what is allowed.
And in exchange for that, the board is talking about conditioning that approval on if anyone wants to build something further on the property, they're going to have to offset that further development on a one-to-one basis. So that would be, what the planning board is talking about is that would be a condition of your approval. And in order to make sure that future property owners are aware of that condition and don't just go ahead and build walkways and additional terraces and et cetera, that is going to be within the chain of title so that future purchasers, when a title search is done and title insurance is given, in the normal course of a real property transaction, that will be something that's flagged, so it'll be put on notice. Otherwise, if it's just in the resolution of the planning board, it's kept on file here in the town clerk's office. A lot of times that's not something that is searched by title companies, so future owners aren't typically aware that there are these restrictions on property going forward.
Right, I guess the only part that I
Can you make sure you speak into the microphone? You can take it off there if you want.
close. I guess the only biggest concern I have is you're kind of now setting another new precedent, and to some degree, you don't want to set precedents. No matter what anybody wants to do in this town, they have to come before the planning board, and to my point,
They don't
you-
a lot of times.
but that's illegal, and if they
But
are,
we can't
if
make
they
'em.
do something that is illegal, the town ultimately has to the ability to
what-
take action on it, which is, to your point, we went and looked at the CO on the things that were built before we bought the property. I just have it's new to me,
Well.
it's a concern. You have these wonderful points that you guys took the time to illustrate on why this is something that could be approved. So I'm not really sure I understand why this additional step needs to be taken that just distinguishes the property from the market point of view different than any other
Well-
property that's subject to the same rules and regulations of the town as I am.
No,
And by
we-
default, you can't build anything more on the property.
We've done this before in terms of notice. In fact, to an increasing degree, we're doing this because we're finding that, like yourself, sometimes you're surprised with when you go to the building department, you find out, my goodness, I didn't realize I was that far over or that I was over. I never heard of such a thing. So we're doing that more frequently, and I think one of the distinguishing features of this particular property is that we're comfortable with that 2,200 square feet. But that's about the edge, I guess, the max of our comfort based on what we're seeing here tonight. And so just to assure, and because we think we're stretching pretty far and making all this, taking all these extraordinary steps to justify what we're doing, we want to make sure that that any future person coming in doesn't go beyond this, because we would be pretty uncomfortable with it and it would be a very bad situation.
See, if when the pergola was built, if that had been in the deed, for instance, then that would have never been built without some sort of lengthy process going through, because the calculation wasn't made. And so we're not, okay, that happened. And it was legal because you got the CO. You found the CO. But
you
I would
don't-
suggest
but
this.
anybody wants to do something illegal to begin with,
No, they don't
regardless
know
of
it's
what the
illegal.
deed says,
They don't know
they'll-
it's illegal.
they'll do it.
They don't have, as someone has
They
said,
want to get around it, and then
there was no intent.
It's tougher for them to get around it that way when there's this kind of legal notice. That's the issue.
But you're right. There's going to be instances where people are going to do it anyway, no matter how much notice is on the record. People are going to do things but what the board has been trying to do with recent applications is try to get as much notice out there as possible to try to cut down on the amount of sort of after the fact approvals that the board has been
Confronted
having to
with all the-
review.
Confronted, and we don't like doing them. But you have a unique case. I suggest perhaps you want to consult with others and see how you feel about it, and come back and talk with us at another time. That would be one thing you could do.
Well, as much as I enjoy coming to talk to you,
Huh? I hear some potential sarcasm. I don't understand.
We were hoping to wrap it up.
Yeah, we understand. Actually, we do have, I think we should move on to Bob's comments, because these are important. Did you get his notice? Okay. So Bob, why don't you run through your
Sure.
issues? And
For some reason or another, the applicant's engineer never submitted a full SWIP. And with the deeps and the perks, and you know the drill, I just haven't received anything yet to look to see if anything's even feasible at all. So basically, ST1, ST2, ST3 have everything to do with the stormwater, including the report and the deeps and the perks, which we haven't even witnessed yet. So for those reasons, I'm recommending to the board that the public hearing remain open until such time that at least the stormwater comments have been addressed. Because I haven't received anything regarding
So-
stormwater.
Okay, I appreciate that. We've recently hired an engineer, Barry Naderman. I met with him yesterday afternoon to review the location of the proposed stormwater. He will be doing that. We have no sense that we cannot accomplish what we need to do in terms of, depths of bedrock, depths of water, all of that. If that became a problem, rain gardens, there are ways to deal with that. Our hopes would be, and we didn't want to spend a lot of money on an engineer if this was going nowhere. So we're at a point now where obviously, as we get closer to this meeting, and I talked to Barry, which is impossible to get a hold of, as you know. Excuse me, Barry.
He's watching.
I finally got him to
If
come
he's
out.
watching, then you're in real trouble.
Right. You're right. So we have every indication that, yes, you can't get a building permit unless we prove that out, obviously. So we're hoping, with the, moving forward tonight, if that can be a condition of, a building permit, obviously. I mean, we can't go anywhere unless those things prove out.
It'd be the first time, but we would just put it as a
I-
condition of the.
A first time, we have enough first times.
Right.
Well,
Is it possible, because you do need to see a draft resolution?
Yep.
Is it possible to close the public hearing, request the draft resolution be prepared for the,
Close the public hearing when information hasn't been submitted?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we'd
or
keep
then
the public
continue
open
it and then request that a draft resolution be prepared
Okay.
prepared
in
simultaneously?
anticipation of closing it, yeah.
And then continue it to, what do you think, Janice?
July 31st,
July 31st?
because the submission deadline for that is,
Which will give you enough time to do, at least
Submit.
do the perks and answer Bob's questions.
Get it done.
Prior to that meeting.
Correct.
Right.
July 9th is the deadline for that. Have the line by then.
Could Barry do all that? Contact Terry, do the deeps, do the perks, submit the test.
Barry, I'm going to say yes. But he will.
There you go. I was going to suggest something more flowery, but flowery.
And then that way the
but
board will
that's
have an
perfect.
opportunity to have a draft resolution that will hopefully be approved July 31st, and you could be good to go to submit
Right, which
for-
you were going to need a resolution anyway, so we're not really losing any time here.
No.
So if you can get all that in time, we should be able to wrap up everything, close the public hearing, and
makes
get the
sense.
approval going.
Bob, does that include the perk test too?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, we'll do everything at once.
Okay.
And we'll have Terry or Bob come out.
Contact Terry.
So, I mean, there's a one-day holiday in the middle there, but it's not so bad, so we have, at least we have some time to
Yeah,
get
and
this
let me know
all
if you
done,
have problems with the timing.
Okay.
all right?
just so we come back on, is there anything else that as a committee or any that we're missing that needs to be addressed for that meeting?
The only thing is Bob's comment.
Yep.
ST1, ST2, ST3.
Right.
That'll be taken.
And you should give
presuming
some, and
everything
you should
works
give some
out,
thought to
fine.
how you feel about a deed restriction.
Well, then,
Yeah,
Alternate.
yeah, no, no.
Will be submitted.
well, I guess the issue, if for some reason it, it doesn't prove out, I mean, hopefully you can, improvise some rain gardens or whatever also and get that submitted, and we'll have that considered
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
again by July 9th. So,
He was
Don't-
pretty affirmative in terms of,
Positively optimistic.
Gary's always like that.
Yes,
yes.
okay.
good.
It's
All right,
getting
so
him there.
continue,
That's
you have to continue the public hearing to July
31.
31st and direct staff to draft a resolution
Okay. So I don't think
outlining
we
the
need a motion for
characteristics.
continuing, but we need a motion for directing staff to draft a resolution.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
it. Thank you.
okay, very good, thanks. We have one last thing on, for this evening, and this is a resolution. This is the resolution for the Snyder application. This was an application for a preliminary subdivision plat amendment for a lot line amendment, 254 Hamilton Road. Pretty straightforward, since it's a resolution waiving our jurisdiction on this particular action.
I didn't have any comments.
I didn't have any comments.
I didn't have any. Jennifer, all set? Did you have any?
Yeah, just the header, Janice will, I'm sure, just update the header to reflect
Take Tom off.
the present
Yep.
attendance.
Okay,
He's not.
That was it.
okay.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't blame him.
And Steve out, I guess, too. Okay. With those changes, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.